The alligator glided through the murky water, its yellow eyes locked onto its prey. The storm had swelled the river, turning it into a churning force, perfect for an ambush. 3 tiny puppies tumbled helplessly downstream, their cries lost in the roar of the current. On the muddy bank, Luna stood frozen, her soaked fur clinging to her trembling frame. Fear gripped her. This river had stolen from her before, left her abandoned and alone. Now it threatened to take her babies. The alligator closed in, jaws parting to reveal jagged, crushing teeth. Seconds remained. If no one helped, they would be gone forever. The swollen river surged through the Florida wetlands, its muddy waters churning with debris from the recent storm. The air was damp and heavy, thick with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. Towering cypress trees stood like silent sentinels, their twisted roots clawing into the flooded banks. The wind carried a low, eerie whistle through the branches, a ghostly reminder of the storm that had passed but left chaos in its wake. On the edge of the riverbank, Luna stood frozen, her golden fur drenched and clinging to her trembling frame. Her eyes were wide with terror, ears pinned back as she stared at the raging waters below. She could see them, 3 tiny shapes tumbling through the current, paws flailing, muzzles barely breaking the surface. Her puppies were slipping away. And they weren't alone. The alligator had been waiting. It lurked beneath the surface, still as death, its ridged back camouflaged in the murky water, its yellow eyes locked onto the floundering pups, watching, calculating. The storm had swollen the river, pushing weak and helpless prey straight into its hunting ground. And now 3 small, struggling creatures had drifted right into its path. The beast inched closer, water rippling around its massive frame. Luna's entire body tensed. She took a step forward, claws digging into the wet soil. She had to jump, had to reach them before it was too late, but she couldn't move. Her body betrayed her, muscles locked in fear. She had been here before. Once, a long time ago, she had trusted someone. A man who had cared for her, who had whispered her name and stroked her fur by the fire. He had been her world, until the night the storm came. She remembered the rain, pounding against the roof, the howling wind that made the trees groan. She had been with him near the river when the ground gave way beneath his feet. He fell, arms flailing, a cry ripped from his throat as the current pulled him under. She had jumped in after him, fought against the waves, searched until her body gave out. She barked until her voice was hoarse, but he never came back. The river had taken him, and since that night it had haunted her. Now it was happening again. The river was stealing from her once more. Her babies. Luna's breath came in short, panicked bursts. She inched closer to the edge, her paws trembling, but the memories wrapped around her like chains, dragging her down, whispering that she would fail, that she would lose them just like she had lost him. The alligator was almost there. Its tail flicked once, propelling its massive body forward. Its jaws parted slightly, rows of jagged teeth gleaming beneath the water. Luna's heart pounded. She had to do something, but she couldn't. And if she didn't, her puppies would be gone forever. With a strangled whimper, Luna spun away from the river. She bolted, paws kicking up mud as she ran toward the road. There had to be someone who would stop, someone who could help. She couldn't save them. But maybe, just maybe, someone else could. The 2-lane road stretched endlessly through the Florida wetlands, its cracked pavement worn by time and weather. Thick cypress trees lined both sides, their roots dipping into the swampy water just beyond the ditch. The storm had passed, but the sky remained heavy with dark clouds, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. Jack Miller gripped the wheel of his old blue pickup truck, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. The rhythmic hum of the tires was the only sound inside the cab, a silence he had grown accustomed to. It had been months since he had driven anywhere without the weight of grief pressing down on his chest. His hands tightened on the wheel as he exhaled slowly. He wasn't sure what he was looking for anymore. A former firefighter, Jack had spent years running into burning buildings, saving lives, making a difference. But ever since he lost his wife, the fire inside him had dimmed. He had stopped believing in miracles, stopped believing in purpose. But something was waiting for him just ahead. A blur of gold shot out onto the road. Jack's reflexes took over. He slammed the brakes, tires screeching against the pavement. The truck lurched forward before coming to a hard stop. His heart pounded. His pulse roared in his ears. Through the windshield he saw it. A dog, soaked, trembling, its golden fur matted with mud. It didn't run. It didn't flinch. It stood there, staring straight at him. Jack's breath hitched. There was something in its eyes, something beyond fear, beyond desperation. It was pleading. Jack swallowed hard. He had seen that look before. In the eyes of people trapped in burning buildings, in the faces of those he had pulled from the brink of death. That silent, desperate question, "Will you help me?" A strange sensation gripped him, a pull deep in his chest, a whisper in his mind. "You have saved strangers from fire. Now save this one." He shook his head, pushing the thought away. Maybe it was just his conscience talking. Or maybe... Jack threw the truck into park. The dog's ears perked up. It turned suddenly and bolted toward the trees, stopping only to glance back at him. Jack hesitated. Then he followed. The wet grass slapped against his boots as he ran, ducking under low-hanging branches, his breath coming faster. The dog never slowed, weaving through the undergrowth like it had one mission and one mission only. Then Jack saw it. The river. His steps faltered as he reached the clearing, his gaze locking onto the chaotic scene before him. 3 tiny puppies, barely clinging to life, tossed by the raging current. And then, movement in the water. A dark shape, a massive, ancient alligator, its yellow eyes gleaming with cold calculation, its massive tail propelling it forward. Jack felt his gut twist. He knew what was about to happen. The mother dog stood at the water's edge, her body shaking. She had led him here for this. Jack didn't think. He acted. With a sharp inhale, he launched himself forward. There was no time to hesitate, because if he did, those puppies wouldn't have another second to live. Chapter 3. A daring rescue, when faith finds its place. Jack hit the water like a stone, the river swallowing him in an instant. The cold was a shock, stealing his breath, but there was no time to think. He forced his body forward, arms slicing through the current, his boots heavy as the water tried to drag him under. His eyes locked on the nearest puppy, a tiny, shivering form, barely afloat. Jack lunged, fingers brushing against soaked fur. He grabbed hold, cradling the pup against his chest before kicking toward the second one. It struggled, weak, but still fighting. Jack reached out, hooked an arm around it and held on tight. But the third... Jack's stomach twisted as he saw the smallest puppy being swept away. The current pulled it fast, its tiny legs barely making a splash against the rushing water. And then came the real danger. A dark shadow cut through the river, barely disturbing the surface. The alligator had locked onto its prey. Its ridged tail propelled it forward, its massive jaws slightly open, waiting for the right moment to strike. Jack kicked hard, pushing against the current, his muscles burning. He reached out, but he was too far. The puppy tumbled just beyond his grasp, inches from the predator's path. The alligator inched closer, its golden eyes gleaming. A moment more, and it would be over. And then the water erupted. A blur of gold crashed through the surface, sending ripples exploding in every direction. Luna had jumped. The mother dog hit the water with a force that defied fear itself. The river had taken everything from her once before, but not this time. This time she would not lose. Her fear shattered in an instant. She paddled, powerful and determined, faster than she ever had before. She reached the smallest pup in seconds, her teeth carefully grabbing its scruff, lifting it above the water. Jack barely had time to process what had just happened. Luna, who had stood frozen on the shore, paralyzed by memories of drowning, had just thrown herself into the very thing that had once terrified her. Because faith was stronger than fear, She had chosen to believe. She had chosen to fight, because God would not abandon her now. Jack surged forward, heart pounding, as Luna grasped the last puppy in her jaws. He reached out, fingers wrapping around her drenched scruff, and with every ounce of strength, he pulled. The river fought back. The weight of the current dragged them down, Luna's soaked fur making it even harder to keep her and the pups above water. But Jack gritted his teeth, kicking against the pull of the flood, inching toward the muddy shore. Then behind him, a shift in the water, a deep, guttural splash. Jack didn't have to turn around to know what it was. The alligator had decided to strike. The beast had lost its element of surprise, and now it was furious. Its massive tail flicked, sending a wave rippling through the river. Jack barely had time to suck in a breath before he heard the horrifying rush of water closing in. It was coming, fast. Jack braced himself, but he knew there was no outswimming this. The monster lunged, jaws wide, and then a deafening crash. Jack twisted in time to see something massive explode from the opposite bank. A second alligator, bigger, older, even more fearsome. It slammed into the attacking beast with the force of a freight train, the impact so violent that the water erupted into a spray of foam and mud. Jack froze. The two predators clashed, their thick tails thrashing, their powerful jaws snapping inches from each other's throats. The river turned into chaos, the once steady current broken by the sheer force of their struggle. Jack had seen a lot in his life: firestorms, collapsing buildings, people rescued in impossible odds. But this was something else entirely. Luna whimpered, but Jack's grip tightened on her. This was their chance. He pushed forward, dragging himself, the mother dog and the puppies towards the shore. His legs burned, every muscle in his body screaming in exhaustion, but he didn't stop. Not now. Not when they were so close. Mud squelched beneath his palms as he finally pulled himself onto the bank. He rolled onto his side, gasping for breath, chest heaving. Luna collapsed next to him, immediately nudging her puppies, making sure they were safe. Jack lay still for a moment, eyes turned toward the raging river. The alligators were still locked in combat, their powerful bodies twisting, slamming into each other, the water around them turning into a foamy mess of rage and survival. He should have been afraid. He should have been questioning everything he had just witnessed, but instead, he felt something else, a presence, a force beyond what he could explain. Had this been a coincidence? Or had God sent this battle at the exact moment it was needed? Jack exhaled, his head falling back against the wet earth. He didn't know the answer. But they were alive. And somehow, deep down, he knew it wasn't just luck. Jack sat on the damp earth, his chest rising and falling in exhausted breaths. The adrenaline was fading, leaving his body heavy, his limbs aching. His clothes were soaked, his hands scraped raw from clawing at the muddy bank. But none of it mattered. Because they had made it. Beside him, Luna nudged each of her puppies frantically, licking their tiny faces, her wet nose pressing against their small, trembling bodies. One by one, she checked them, ensuring they were safe, alive. Jack watched her, something tightening in his chest. He had seen devotion before. He had seen it in firefighters who ran into flames without hesitation, in parents who clung to their children in the worst moments of their lives. But this was something pure, unshaken, unbreakable. Luna hadn't hesitated to face her greatest fear for her babies. Jack exhaled, a deep breath that felt like releasing years of weight from his soul. "You're something else, you know that?" he murmured. Luna lifted her head, her deep brown eyes meeting his. Jack hesitated for a moment before reaching out, fingers brushing against her damp fur. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let him stroke her head, her ears twitching slightly, her body still trembling but no longer from fear. Jack swallowed hard. It had been a long time since he had felt this, since he had allowed himself to feel this. Love. Not the kind that demanded anything in return. Not the kind that came with pain or expectations. Just simple, pure, unconditional love. "You're a hell of a mother," he whispered. His voice cracked slightly, and he cleared his throat, forcing himself to blink against the unfamiliar sting in his eyes. Luna didn't understand his words, but she understood something deeper. She leaned into his touch, just for a second. And in that moment, he knew. He wasn't leaving them here, not after all of this. The thought settled into his heart as naturally as breathing. By the time the sun started peeking through the storm clouds, Jack was back in his truck. 3 tiny, sleepy puppies curled up on an old flannel shirt in the passenger seat. Luna sat beside them, her eyes still watching him, cautious but trusting. Jack started the engine. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't driving aimlessly. He was going home. The story of the golden retriever who had thrown herself in front of a truck to save her babies spread through town faster than wildfire. People stopped Jack at the grocery store, at the gas station, even outside the fire station where he had once worked. They all wanted to hear it again. But Jack never told it the way they expected. Because to him, this wasn't just a story about a dog. It was a story about faith, about how sometimes God puts you on the right road at the right time. And if you listen, you just might find exactly what you've been missing. The television flickered in a quiet living room, the evening news casting a soft glow against the dim walls. A man sat on a worn-out couch, a steaming cup of coffee resting on the table beside him. He wasn't paying attention to the screen at first. Just another feel-good rescue story, another fleeting moment in the endless cycle of news, until he saw her. His breath caught in his throat. The cup in his hand trembled, nearly slipping from his grasp. Luna. The golden retriever on the screen sat beside a broad-shouldered man in a fireman's jacket, her deep brown eyes calm, her ears flicking at the sound of his voice. 3 puppies played at her feet, tumbling over one another, yipping in excitement. The news anchor was speaking. Something about a heroic mother dog who had stopped traffic to save her drowning pups. The town had rallied around them, a symbol of love and resilience. But the man in the living room wasn't listening. His past had just come crashing down in front of him. Luna was alive, and all these years she had believed he had abandoned her. 2 years earlier. The storm had been merciless. Rain lashed against the ground, soaking the dirt roads, swelling the river until it overflowed into the fields. He had been walking with Luna near the water's edge, just as he always did when the storms came. She had never been afraid of the rain. She had trusted him to protect her. But that night he had failed her. The ground beneath him crumbled. A sickening lurch, then he was falling, tumbling into the raging current. Cold, dark, his head slammed against something hard. His lungs burned as he choked on the floodwaters, pulling him under. And then, nothing. When he woke up, he wasn't in his bed. He wasn't even in his town. He had no memory of what had happened. The doctors told him he had been found miles away, washed up on the riverbank by a fisherman. He had been unconscious for days, his head injury severe enough to erase large portions of his past. The people who found him had tried to help, but without identification, without anyone looking for him, he was just another nameless, lost soul. For years he had wandered through life, trying to put together the pieces of a puzzle that never quite fit. He had rebuilt himself, but something had always felt missing, and now he knew why. Luna's struggle. While he had been drifting through the world with no past, Luna had been searching for him. The river had spit her out onto the muddy banks, far from where she had last seen him. She had run along the water's edge, barking, searching, waiting for his familiar voice to call her home. But the voice never came. For days she circled the area, refusing to leave. She didn't understand. He had always been there, always come back. Why not now? But hunger had clawed at her belly, and thirst burned in her throat. The storm had destroyed everything, leaving little behind. There was no home to return to, no familiar scent to follow. So she had walked, mile after mile, town after town. She had learned quickly that humans could be both cruel and kind. Some had thrown scraps of food her way. Others had chased her off with sticks and stones. Once, she had been taken in by a family with young children, but when they moved, they left her behind like an afterthought. Each time she started again, pushing forward with nothing but a faint hope that she would find him. But the years passed, and one day she stopped searching, not because she had forgotten, but because hope had finally run dry. The present. His hands shook as he turned up the volume. The news anchor was smiling, the firefighter, Jack Miller, according to the screen, stroking Luna's fur. She had a home now, a family, and she had moved on. His throat tightened. Had he even earned the right to go back, to show up after all these years, expecting her to remember? But then he saw it, the way she looked at Jack, the trust in her eyes. That wasn't something built in a day, that was something earned. She had finally found someone to protect her again. His heart clenched. He had to see her, not to take her back. He had no right to do that, but to let her know he never meant to leave, that he had been lost too. The small town buzzed with excitement as the local news station set up for another interview. Ever since Luna's incredible story had gone public, Jack had received calls from reporters, animal rescue groups, and even people who just wanted to meet the brave mother dog. Jack wasn't one for attention. He had spent his life running into fires, saving others, not standing in front of cameras. But Luna's story wasn't just about him. It was bigger than that. And so he sat on his porch, Luna lying at his feet, her puppies, now stronger and healthier, playing in the yard. The reporter adjusted her microphone, smiling warmly. "We're back with Jack Miller and Luna, the heroic mother dog who captured all of our hearts. Jack, can you tell us how life has changed since that incredible rescue?" Jack exhaled, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. "Well," he started, glancing down at Luna, "I guess you could say I didn't just save her. She saved me too." The reporter smiled, nodding. But before Jack could say more, a voice called out from beyond the camera crew. A voice that made Luna freeze. "Luna!" The golden retriever lifted her head. Something in her changed. Her ears perked up, her body went rigid, her deep brown eyes widening in disbelief. Jack turned, following her gaze. A man stood at the edge of the yard, looking like he had seen a ghost. He wasn't young, but he wasn't old either. His clothes were simple, his face worn by years of hardship, but his eyes were full of emotion. The cameras were still rolling, but the world around them seemed to go silent. For a moment, Luna just stared. Then a shudder ran through her body, her breath hitched, and she ran straight toward him. The man dropped to his knees, just as she crashed into him, burying her face against his chest. A sob tore from his throat as he wrapped his arms around her, gripping her as if she might disappear again. Jack stood frozen on the porch, watching as Luna whimpered, licked the man's face, pawed at him like she couldn't believe he was real. The man was crying. "I looked for you," he whispered into her fur. "God help me, I tried. I thought you were gone." Luna whined, pressing herself closer to him, her tail wagging so fast it was a blur. Jack felt something tighten in his chest. He had seen dogs reunited with their owners before, but this was different. This was something deeper. The man lifted his head, meeting Jack's gaze. His eyes were red, raw with emotion. I don't even know what to say," he choked out. "I lost my memory after the storm. I never meant to leave her. I never stopped missing her." He swallowed hard, glancing down at the golden retriever still clinging to him. "She was my best friend." Jack nodded slowly. He had spent the past few months thinking Luna had been abandoned, that she had been left behind by someone who didn't care. But now he knew the truth. She hadn't just lost her home, she had lost her person. Jack knelt down beside them, reaching out to scratch behind Luna's ear. "She never gave up on you," he said quietly. "She waited." The man let out a shaky laugh, wiping at his eyes. "I should have known. She always was stubborn." Silence settled between them. Then Jack exhaled, glancing at the 3 puppies still playing in the yard. "She has a family now," he said carefully. "She's safe here." The man nodded, voice thick with emotion. "I can see that." He looked back at Luna, his fingers still tangled in her fur. "I don't want to take her away from the home she's found. But would it be okay if I visited?" Jack smiled. "I think she'd like that. And from the way Luna's tail wagged even faster, it was clear that she agreed. Sometimes God places us exactly where we need to be, not just to help others, but to remind us of the love and faith we may have forgotten. Luna never gave up on her babies, and in the end, she found a family she never expected. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that miracles still happen. Have you ever witnessed an act of love or courage like this? Share your own story in the comments below. We would love to hear it. May God bless you and your loved ones, and may we all learn to listen when He calls us to stop, to see, and to save.